We don't rise to the standards we have when others are watching. We fall to the standards we have when no one is watching. The only work that really matters is the work that no one sees. It shows you who you really are rather than who you say you are.
There's this line that I heard David Goggins say on Rogan, and I can't remember who he was saying it to or what he said in response to, but he just said, "I'm David Goggins, bitch." And I remember him saying it, and I thought to myself, like, you want to be able to say that in the mirror to yourself and not laugh at yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way that I can do that is know that when no one's watching, I work harder than when they're watching. And thinking about it like that has given me this persistent and ever-present scorecard or third party that's like, no one's watching, which means now you have to work because otherwise you're full of shit. And so it's this continuous reinforcing cycle of the me and other me holding the whip behind me to see how much I can take. But with each lash of the whip that I take, learning that I can take it and continue to trudge on. And so as long as you keep going, you bear witness to yourself of what you are capable of. And I find that incredibly satisfying in the trenches of misery when you have to go through it.
It means that you're not full of shit.
I'm still here.
It means that you're not full of shit. What it comes down to is, I think I told you this story about when I was with Sam last year in LA. So Sam Ovens used to make content on the internet. Now he's very much an operator rather than a front-facing, which is funny to think about Sam the creator as opposed to Sam the operator. And I asked why he'd stopped making content. And he said, because I felt like I had to start living up to in private the things which I was saying in public. And he was beginning to feel discordance between the two. You know, he was making changes personally, but he'd created a brand publicly. But I think if you can get to the stage where the public version of you is the best version of you, and then private you has to live up to the best version of you, and then you get to do this sort of self-reinforcing cycle, that's kind of the virtuous version of that, which I guess is kind of similar to what you're talking about here.
So I think what we're teasing at is authenticity. And so a lot of people feel like imposters because what they think, what they say, and what they do are completely different. But from an operational perspective, because that's how I like to define a lot of words, which is what do I have to do to be that, right? What do I have to do to be authentic? And you can describe someone as authentic by saying, how would you behave if there was no possibility of punishment? And so if you could not be punished at all, that behavior is who you are authentically. And so, in my opinion, our degrees of freedom are predicated on how much, to what extent we act as though we could not be punished. And so if what we want to do and what we do have no possibility of punishment, that is what we are when we are our true selves.
Jimmy Carr talks about nobody throws a Coke can out of the window with kids in the back.
Right.
That means you're a fucking monster.
Yeah.
It's what you do when there's no one around. Your old one about authenticity. People are attracted to authenticity, but it's hard to define for me. Here's my best attempt. True alignment of what you think, what you say, and what you do. The hardest part is realizing that our thoughts are fucked and that we have to fix them instead of faking the next two.
And it's exactly that. And I actually think ground zero of that is living out your fucked thoughts and then slowly trying, like, I think I think the hardest jump is actually doing and saying what you think. When someone's like, hey, what do you think about this? And you're like, I wasn't paying attention at all. It's like, oh, wow. Okay. And so then you basically become, because I think if personal truth of not lying to, if you start by not lying to yourself and then you start saying those things, then you start not lying to other people. And I think if you can decrease the friction between what you really think and what you say, it starts to create some virtuous cycle outside of you that starts to orient your behavior so that you actually start doing what you really think. And I have integrity, but in the truest sense as one of my personal kind of goals. But it's jarring to people when you're just honest and like really honest. Like, hey, do you want to go to this, to Sarah's birthday party? No. And they're like, what do you mean? You busy? I'm like, no, I'm not busy, but I don't want to go. people have a hard time just saying no to things. And I would encourage you, if you're listening to this, like try saying no to, try actually telling the truth when you don't want to do something. Because we have so many social niceties that we say, oh, I'm really busy, or it's a really bad time right now, or whatever. I had somebody the other day, I was with a friend and I didn't notice that I did this. So sometimes it's nice to have somebody from the outside. And so somebody came up to me, we were looking at a real estate property, and someone knew I was going to be there and said, that guy showed up unannounced or whatever. And he was like, hey man, can we do a podcast? And I was like, I'm just in town, going to hang out with Layla for the next few days. Like, not really trying to do that. And he asked again, and he was like, hey, maybe like 20 minutes. We can just rock one out. And I was like, well, let me show you my calendar. And I pulled up my calendar and it was all empty. And I said, see, there's nothing on there. And I was like, and I just want to keep it that way. And I didn't think anything of it, but apparently he left, and then my friend just starts crying, laughing, just thinking how hilarious. He's like, I can't believe you said that. That was so boss, blah, blah. And I was like, what is he talking about? He's like, you just showed him your calendar that you had nothing, and you were still like, you're still not going to get any of my time. And I didn't perceive any of this extra narrative that he added to it. But I think just being able to say no to stuff when people ask you for it, because people ask you for stuff all the time. It's these little nibs, these little tiny things. Hey, can you do this? Or hey, can we show up to this thing? Or hey, you're supposed to. Or hey, your aunt did that one thing for you, so therefore you owe her. And saying like, I don't subject myself to those rules. And I had a New Year's resolution, which I do believe in making resolutions. Like, why not? If you stick with them. And so one of my more recent ones was, there are no such thing as social obligations, only consequences. So you have no social obligations. You have social consequences, but you don't have social obligations. And so you have to go. I don't have to go. If I don't go, what will happen as a result? It decreases the likelihood they will invite me again, which is great because then I won't have to say no again. So this actually saves me time in the future. And so a lot of people don't play out the like, what happens if? It's like, oh, more of the thing that I would prefer, which is not getting invited to these stupid weddings, or not getting invited to these, Christs or whatever they're called, whatever the thing is. You probably know what the word I'm trying to say.
I do what you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, kids getting circumcised, or I think maybe
you go and watch it? Like a viewing gallery?
That's a common thing. Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
American
circumcisions. I think it's a bris. Whatever. Doesn't matter.
All right.
Point being, if you say no and are honest about why you said no, people will be jarred, but then you get this muscle, when we're talking about that muscle of being authentic, which is just saying what you really think. And I think that when you do that, you unlock a certain level of confidence in yourself, where you're like, oh, I didn't die. Oh, actually what I would prefer to have happened as a result of that. Oh, you know what? It's Friday night and I am going to get a good night's sleep because I do have a clear day tomorrow and I'm going to work my face off, and I didn't have to go to Sarah's thing. And to me, that's like, over time, I think I just do more and more and more of that, and it feels better and better and better.
It's funny that your friend saw that as a flex, that it was, and I can see why. And I think I would too. Oh my God, dude, like you totally owned him with that thing. Like you showed off the fact that you've got nothing. But really, if we're all being honest, if we didn't want to do it, that is the truth.
Right.
The only reason that it feels like a flex is that it's such a left turn from the social mores that people typically go through. I said this to you yesterday.
Yeah.
Dan Bilzerian's superpower
Yeah.
is his frictionlessness from what he wants to his mouth. Say what you want about Dan, but he's lived very unapologetically. And that's, what are the things that you can get downstream from that? I mean, maybe you don't like his values or his principles. Maybe you think that he's a bad guy, or maybe you think he's worth more or less money than he actually is, all of these things. But what you can't say is that you don't trust the things that he does are not the things that he wants to do. And that commands a level of respect. That absolutely, and it should command a level of respect.
I actually think that when you live that way, people trust you more because their ability to predict your behavior.
100%. If I can't trust your no, how can I trust your yes?
Right. And I think when people see you say no and then later say yes, your yes means a lot more.
Of course. Because it's the same thing Peterson talks about, that a rabbit can't be good. It just has no choice to be otherwise. You can't, the vicious, I think that some rabbits are a bit like they're twats. So you probably can find some that are nasty.
If you're a beginner, just figuring out how to make your first dollar, I'm a co-owner of Skool.com, Skool.com. you can start for free. It's a cool setup that we have to help people do it. And right now, 54.1% of people who start a paid community on Skool make money. So we have put a tremendous amount of effort, Sam and I, into trying to remove all barriers and all friction for people who are getting started so that they have literally no excuses.
It's a way better strike rate than OnlyFans.
I don't know what their strike rate is, but we've worked really hard to. If you saw the amount of detail, I mean, maybe you heard some of this from the podcast, but the amount of detail that went into like where buttons go and what things we remove was actually a big one. Was how can we so pare this down so that people don't get overwhelmed? Because the number one reason people cancel or decide not to do something is overwhelm. And so we're like, okay, how can we funnel action into the clearest possible steps that people go step 1, step 2, step 3, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, this actually worked. And so it's been really cool to see the thousands of people who have made their first dollar, which is what I make all my content about it to begin with. And so it's been the ride of my life. It's been awesome.
Okay, I appreciate you, man.